What is common to all of us? We have all been learners at schools. However, there is a difference between a learner and a student. And for me, my paradigm shift, or my shift and transformation, is that the teacher is outdated. Welcome to the Learning Designer. I will let you conclude as I move along about what we need to do. First, if I read 100 books on medicine, how many of you would trust me to perform surgery on them? All right, there goes job number one. Didn't work. How about if I read 150 books on flying a Boeing 777? How many of you would trust me to pilot the plane? Damn, there goes the second job. How about if we say, why wouldn't anybody trust me in any of these jobs? Very, very simply is information is not knowledge. Let's look at the differences between information and knowledge. Information can be stored outside the mind. From time immemorial, it has been stored on cave walls, on tablets, and more recently, on devices, and even more recently, in clouds. So information is everywhere. Information no longer makes us the learned person. However, knowledge can only be stored in the mind. What I want to say is, information can be forgotten. That's why we keep diaries. That's why we have records. However, knowledge is forever. Let's look at, first of all, the sources of information in any learning situation. Where does the information come from? Now, people will make a long list, but I have boiled it down to channels. Information can be heard. Information can be seen. Information now can be read. So when people are learning languages in a classroom, the sources of information for the learner is either one or some of these three combined. Like a video is viewed and heard. However, we cannot disregard that there is also prior knowledge or information in a person's mind. There is an information or knowledge called a priori, which means that you know, nobody needs to tell you that if you step off something, you will fall. It's a priori. No, you don't need to learn that. And there is information that is acquired from Googling, looking at YouTube, or my favorite, watching TEDx. And if you are learning, let's say, math and science, you need to add where information comes from. Instead of saying the five senses, we can say information can come from heat. That's why you say it's cold or hot. It can come from light, dark, dim, taste, smell, pressure. These are natural sources of information. So any learning designer, not teacher, needs to know where does information come from as they design. Now, I can have a lot of knowledge in my head. However, if I don't react or bring it out, called response, how would people know what I'm thinking? Unfortunately, the vast knowledge and minds that we've got, the response of the human being is very, very limited. If I've got a word in my head, I've got very limited ways to let you know. I can tell you what it is. I can demonstrate it. I can provide an image by either drawing it or pointing to it or showing you the object. And this is the most recent acquired one, writing it. Human beings are not born with the ability to write. It's something learned. So if we are going to design learning for academic situations, should the source of information be only the teacher, or should the source of information be only a textbook, or should the source of information be vast and varied? The second thing is, in order for this to happen, or anything to happen in learning, there needs to be a response. If you sit there quietly, listening to the teacher, chances are nothing's going to happen up here. So, what is information? If you look at this formula, Albert Einstein, E equals mc squared, is it knowledge or is it information? For the viewer, the reader, or the receiver, it's information. It means I can say E equals is energy, mass, constant, squared, but it's just information. However, what is knowledge? Knowledge is when you can take an action or not take an action based on that information, then you have converted that information into knowledge. So, coming back to designing learning, the whole idea of converting information into knowledge is the way we process it. There are two basic abilities. One is innate. You are born with the ability to process. And then there is the one that you're taught or acquire as you're growing up on how to process information. What I mean by process, people will simply say the word think, but as a learning designer, you cannot stop at the word think. You need to break it down. For example, you don't need to go to school or get an education in order to be able to compare. You're born with it. You do not need to go to school to learn to find a pattern, like red, blue, green. Red, blue, everybody knows what the next one is, because your mind hears the information, processes it, and then you respond by speaking, writing, acting out, or showing. So now we have the basic engine of converting information into knowledge. We need three ingredients: information, processing it, and responding to that information. So as a learning designer, what is the difference between is learning and have learned? Our schools, or a large number or percentage of the schools, are still very much the bell rings, you go in, there is a teacher, then the bell ring, and the teacher will step out. So within that period of 45, 50 minutes, 90 minutes, depending on the situation, from the beginning towards the end, we will call it is learning. But by the end, there should have been a have learned. Or else, what a waste of time. So, is learning is the ability or simply finding out how to convert information into knowledge, and the have learned would be I have the ability to convert new information into knowledge. Here's an example. The role of the teacher in the past used to be a giver of information because the information was not present anywhere else. There was no means of storage. Until recently, very few books. I remember when I was in the 8th grade. If I needed something, my mother had to take me to the library to find a book which contained that information, and the book was already 8 years old. Today we have instant access. So the information is exploding at a dizzying rate. Nobody can remember all that information. So the teacher or the instructor is no longer the provider of information. We have more up-to-date sources. So how has the role of teacher changed from giving information, explaining, which is more giving information, to helping children convert information into knowledge and checking their ability to do so? Well, in the process, there must be one unfamiliar and one familiar. Therefore, if the person can take new information, process it by comparing it, finding a pattern, classifying it, and then respond to it, then that person is able to convert information into knowledge. We call that assessment tool. So the assessment tool will be, I will provide you with new unfamiliar information and see how you will handle the new context. But that is have learned. Let's go back to is learning. As a learning designer, I want to help children learn how to do it. So the secret ingredient now is no longer what is the answer, Johnny, but how do we find the answer, Johnny? If we learn how to do that, more people will learn, rather than you got 5 wrong out of 10. But why? I don't know. So a how would work backwards. As a designer, I will design the response in such a way to make the mind compare. For example, if I say, write 5 words that show the differences between the 2 pictures, your mind is forced to contrast, and your response is writing the forward. So the design forces the mind to compare, and it works from bottoms up. What are the implications now for the schooling system as it exists in many places today? Number 1 is differentiation. You can make the response more difficult or less difficult. For example, a true or false is less difficult. Write out the answer to the question is more difficult. It's not more complex, more difficult. And in the process, we can make the processing go up higher. For example, in the traditional, draw a line from the picture to the word that is matching. But I can make it comparison and contrast by saying, write the words next to the correct 2 characters. And for information, we can make the access of the information more accessible or either less accessible, depending on how difficult. So how do we design differentiation in the classroom? We work with the basic engine, and you change one of the variables. Now, the last part is, what are the implications for technology? Unfortunately, I'm speaking from experience with a lot of different schools in parts of the world. Technology has simply become a new storage system. And as a new storage system, we are not harnessing the power of technology. What we can do is, instead of just replacing the book with a tablet, meaning putting the information on a tablet, which is more accessible, we do not simply change the writing paper to a pad. The idea is the response should not be a give back. The response should be the design that makes the mind function or process information in a certain way and scaffold it. This is the design that is missing from a lot of the technology that I've been working with or together with other people, saying, but how, or show me the learning part. Yes, I know you put the answer here, but how did they learn it? And that is the key. So in order to end, I'm going to say this. In 20 years' time, the future is not going to be for those who know. It is going to be for those who can create new knowledge. And what we want to do in our paradigm shift is the learning designer needs to design learning with the precision of an engineer and the creativity of an artist. Thank you very much.